Informational interviews can be really powerful networking tools, but if you aren't asking the right questions during these conversations, these can ultimately go to waste. And in my experience, having done hundreds of these throughout my career, there's a huge variation in the value you can get from a meeting or a phone call, and this almost always comes down to how you guide the conversation. So in this video, I want to walk through what I've found to be 5 of the most powerful questions you can ask within an informational interview and why each of these is so important. So the first question I love asking in informational interviews is, why did you decide to get into real estate in the first place? In my opinion, this is one of the best ways to start a conversation because this can give you a lot of insight into how your values and your own goals ultimately line up with the person that you're talking with. This can also help you understand whether this person actually followed through on what they initially wanted to accomplish by starting out in this business, and whether the career path they ultimately pursued is something that you'd want to emulate. For example, I've talked to a lot of very successful senior leaders of some very big companies in this industry who have answered this question by telling me they had always wanted to start their own firm, but eventually life got in the way and they weren't able to do that. In other situations, I've talked to people that were absolutely determined to make their goals a reality no matter what, and these people told me about the risk they took and the issues they ran into when trying to make that happen. My goal personally was always to weigh the advice of people who had very intentionally built their own careers more heavily than the people that didn't end up where they wanted to be, even if those career paths sounded more prestigious on paper. I also love asking this question because this is one of the best ways to make these conversations a lot more human and a lot less transactional overall, and this allows you to understand each person's values and priorities at a much deeper level and how those ultimately align with what you personally value. Now, the second question I like to ask in an informational interview is, if you had to start your career over again, what would you do differently? This question is a great way to indirectly ask people about what they regret about their career path, and this can give you a really honest look into the mistakes that people ahead of you have made that they wouldn't do again. Some of the answers to this question that I've heard over the years include acquisitions managers wishing they went into brokerage, chief investment officers wishing they struck out on their own, and VPs of huge companies wishing they had jumped ship to a smaller, more entrepreneurial firm. This question is a great way to get more clarity on what career paths provide the most income upside, what career paths provide the most autonomy, and what career paths provide the best work-life balance in this industry. So this is an especially helpful question to ask if you're not quite sure where you want to start out. And when you have enough of these conversations, you'll start to notice some patterns that can help guide your own decisions going forward. And these answers can give you a lot of insight into what career paths can ultimately get you to where you want to go. Now, the third question I like to ask in informational interviews is, what's something people think your job involves but actually doesn't? This question directly calls out a lot of the preconceived notions that you might have that might not actually be true, that could also be having a major influence on the career path you think you want to pursue. Answers to this question I've heard over the years include travel being a lot less glamorous than it sounds, especially as you get older, the amount of time spent doing more tedious, time-consuming work being a lot more than you think as you start to manage more people, and even a lack of involvement with some key parts of the transaction process for senior acquisitions professionals working at bigger firms. I like this question a lot because this is a very respectful way to ask someone about the least appealing parts of their job, and this can help you get a much more realistic sense of what your day-to-day experience might be like if you were to go down a similar path. Now, the next question I like asking in informational interviews is, what's the most worthwhile thing you did early on in your career to progress more quickly than your peers? When you're just starting out in commercial real estate, there are a ton of things you could pay attention to, but the answers to this question will help you find the best things you can do to be as efficient with your time as possible. Answers to this question I've heard over the years include joining different industry organizations, taking on certain projects at work, pursuing additional real estate specific education or training, or even moving to a brand new city to increase the number of opportunities you're exposed to on a regular basis. I like this question a lot because it can give you a very clear direction on the most impactful things you can do with your time early on when you're just starting out, especially when you hear this from people that you admire. Now, the last question I want to mention in this video might be the most important of any of these we've talked about, and this is based on what you know about my background and my goals. Is there anyone else in your network that you'd recommend I talk to? The goal here is to not be overly pushy and ask for a connection to a specific person or multiple people at the same time, but if you come off during the conversation as someone who's hardworking, respectful, and has potential in this industry, a lot of people are going to be willing to make an introduction. And if people aren't comfortable doing this, they'll often say something like, "I'll think about it and get back to you," and they just ultimately won't follow up. But if the person does end up wanting to help you, the upside of this is huge. This one question allowed me to get in front of some of the most successful people in this industry that would have never agreed to talk to me with just a cold email, and this is one of the best methods out there that I know of to make connections with very successful people in this industry very quickly. Now, regardless of the questions you choose to ask during these conversations, there are two things you want to keep in mind both during and after the conversation. The first thing is that you want these conversations to be as natural and fluid as possible, so don't go into a phone call or in-person meeting with the goal to march through a pre-built itinerary, and instead ask follow-up questions on things the person is talking about, and just generally treat this as a normal conversation rather than a way to just extract information. And the second thing is to make sure you follow up with these people both within 24 hours of the initial conversation to say thank you, highlighting a few key pieces of advice that stood out to you from the meeting, and when it makes sense, several months after the initial conversation, following up with your progress and how you implemented that person's advice. The more you can make it clear that you were listening intently and taking the conversation seriously, the more likely it is that you'll be able to build a long-term relationship with those people you connect with. And if you plan to build a career in this industry, these connections can end up helping you many years down the road. So these are some of my favorite strategies for informational interviews, but there's obviously a lot more that goes into the job search process itself. So if you want to learn more about the networking process and you want to make sure you have the technical skills you'll need to make it through the interview process at commercial real estate firms, make sure to check out our all-in-one membership training platform, Breaking a CRE Academy. A membership to the Academy will give you instant access to over 120 hours of video training on real estate financial modeling and analysis. You'll get access to hundreds of practice Excel interview exam questions, sample acquisition case studies, and you'll also get access to the Breaking a CRE Analyst Certification exam, which covers topics like real estate pro forma and development modeling, commercial real estate lease modeling, equity waterfall modeling, and many other real estate financial analysis concepts that will help you prove to employers that you have what it takes to tackle the responsibilities of an analyst or associate at a top real estate firm. And if you like this video and want to see more content on the networking process or informational interviews, make sure to hit the like button and let me know. And let me know in the comments any other questions that you make sure to ask during these conversations and why you would add those to this list. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you found this helpful. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to see more videos like this every single week, and I'll see you in the next video.